Hello and welcome to the Hmong Woman podcast. This is the Dear Hmong Woman submissions. My name is Doji,
I'm Emily.
I'm Ariel.
and today for our submission, we have a letter here from a female, 31, and they currently reside in Minnesota here. So thank you so much for submitting in your story or your dilemma for us to share with our audience. And it goes, I'm interested in getting to know non-Hmong, non-Asian men, but I feel fearful. I didn't have positive experiences growing up with non-Hmong people, and I've always avoided getting to know non-Hmong men. I feel inferior and different around other races, like I'm not valued or understand. My family values and ideals also held me back from bonding with non-Hmong people. I want to explore out of the Hmong community, but I don't know where to start. Due to my shy nature, it's hard to approach people. Do you ladies have any experiences with dating outside of the race or ethnicity? What is your advice? And how do you separate that feeling of not being enough around other races?
Growing up in a homogenous culture can make you fearful of approaching other communities, right? When you're so used to the same thing and the same people all the time, it can become uncomfortable. Like, how do I explore making new friends in different cultures? And so I just think that start comfortably, but don't hold any biases or stereotypes when you're going into these new environments, right? They're probably just as get rid of race and ethnicity. They're probably just as fearful of what if I make this new friend and we just don't fit, or they're just a bad person. And then of course you add race and stereotypes and ethnicity on top of that. So I think just go into the world kindly and authentically and you'll find your people, whether they're Hmong or not. But at the end of the day, I don't think dating outside of your ethnicity is wrong. Although I can understand culturally why you would be afraid to. So
Yeah, and I think as I was reading this, I noticed that you had said you didn't have positive experiences growing up with non-Hmong people. And so to me, that sort of brought up the things that our community already struggle with, which is, obviously the anti-Blackness, the systemic racism that we all have to go through. And that sort of, in a way, shaped our personal views as well on interracial dynamics. But I do think it's important to say, and I've said this in other episodes, where, it's important to remember that the actions of one person shouldn't define a whole race. So just because someone of a different color did that to you doesn't mean the entire race is horrible, Just how you wouldn't want to be labeled something, other people wouldn't want to be either.
yeah.
So going to all white school, I realized that it was really good for me to be around other races. And it has its pros and cons, right? And I've talked to people about this before where I do wish I was around folks that looked like me a little bit more, but because I wasn't, I was also exposed to other people who didn't, talk the same way I didn't eat the same food. So I'm really grateful, honestly, that I got that sort of exposure really early on as a kid. And then I also think about how the community has acted in the past, right? So even with our elders and community where I do remember going to the grocery store and then Black people being around us and then my grandma clutching her purse. And I don't think that's, I don't think that's not universal, but I feel like in every culture, we do sort of hold that stereotype against other races.
Mm-hmm.
So when she said that, I was like, I think you really do have to, what is it? You need to understand how you grew up and I'll understand how that's also impacted you as of now. Because once you really understand that, you can also choose how you'd like to be different and how you'd like to show up differently as well. So
I also wrote here, you got to check your own biases and stereotypes when you go out, right? Go in with those stereotypes and biases. Obviously, you're going to get what you're expecting.
Yeah, I think you ladies both make a really good point, and I'm going to piggyback off that. I have here, I think it is important to acknowledge your family values and your ideals and how it's played a significant role in your life and how you're leading into the world with that. You have to eventually learn how to navigate through the differences of the world. And that's something that I feel I can empathize with too. Although I grew up in a predominantly white school, because I went to school on the East Coast before I moved here to the Midwest. And so I was amongst a lot of white people during that time. And I felt like I didn't have the best experience either, because I felt I was always different, and I was. But it was more of I internalized a lot of things. I think I identified myself as being very different, and so I don't think I gave it a chance to really connect with others, because I've always felt very Hmong at my core based on how I grew up. And I think I would take on more of the negative comments as opposed to the positive, because when I really do look back, there's a lot of good and bad comments in there. I just tend to stick more to the negative things, and I think that's really shifted my perspective on, like, I don't want to go outside of this because it doesn't feel safe. Um, and in our dating episode, way in the beginning of this, when I wasn't in a relationship, that's something that I had talked to both of you girls about. Like, I never dated outside of the race, and it's something I want to, but I just don't know how to go about it. And I feel like I can truly empathize with this through evaluating everything. I think it's more in my mind than it is in the world itself. Of course, there are factors you have to deal with. And there are going to be both a mixture of good and bad people out there, whether it's within our community or outside of it. So,
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think for me, going from a white school to a Hmong school, like I never really felt excluded, but I think that's because the people that I was surrounded myself around, like I felt like we embraced ourselves and our cultures very well. And I'm honestly super happy that like I was never really bullied or like, picked on. So I guess that's one of the pros. But I learned a lot about people's backgrounds and about people's lives and like how they live their lives differently. And I think when you're stuck in one setting and one group of people your entire life, like I just want to like put out there that it is very valid that you feel that way, that like it's very scary and it's very daunting to be like, oh, I want to try something new. Like I wonder how that's going to be. But like it is possible and like it's fun. So, yeah.
One thing that you also wrote is that you felt inferior to other races. And so I just wonder, like, why you feel inferior, and is the interaction mainly with a certain group that made you feel inferior? And you should never feel inferior to any group, any person, whether it is a Hmong person or not. And I think that you just have a lot of inner dialogue that you need to work through before you decide to pursue anything romantically or friendship-wise with somebody, because I know that I wouldn't want somebody to come into a friendship with me who isn't Hmong going, I just want you to teach me about these things as a Hmong person that I misunderstand. Like, that's your job to do as someone who is saying that they're actively going out looking for friendships or romantic, relationships outside of a Hmong person. And like Ariel stated, it's going to be, everything new is hard, but you can do hard things. You just have to put the effort into that. So
honestly, when I was reading this, I was like, you have a lot to unpack.
yeah.
Girl, sit back and think about it.
That's why I'm like, there's so many layers to this. It's yeah.
I was like, she needs to sit down and unpack a couple things because this stuff is a lot. And I'm sure it's not just like one incident, I'm sure it's like maybe a couple small bad incidents where she's like, oh, like I probably shouldn't date this race because this happened. But I think the one thing that kept echoing in my brain when I read this was that like no one is superior above me, right? And we're all equals, honestly. And at the end of the day, like your self-value comes from yourself and not from anyone else. So like even if I, walk down the street and I was catcalled, for example, like I'm not going to automatically think, oh, my self-value is like less now. Like I think you really just need to understand and build up that self-value again and be like, no matter who you are, no matter what race, like you're not going to talk down to me that way and you're not going to lower my self-worth. So just putting it out there, like people, they just don't, they can only do so much to affect your self-value if you have it in you already.
Right.
So,
and the other thing too with the value is like, why are you specifically asking about dating non-Hmong people? Is it because it's something like just like something on your checklist that you just want to check off? Like I did it, I feel good about trying it. Or is it you genuinely going, I'm thinking that I'm attracted to not just Hmong people, right? Like what is the reason behind that? I think that also leads to the value part, right? Because I know Like, is it because Hmong people have made you felt less valued? And so you're like, I want to try exploring dating outside of the culture. Like, what is that reason?
Yeah, actually, you guys made me think of a couple of things because I know that this is a path that I've been on where I really contemplated back and forth, and those were some of the questions. Like, do I actually feel attracted to people outside of the race, and what are the reasons why I feel scared? And I think it really, for me, tied back to the things I've been told about outside of the Hmong community itself. It's like, we've mentioned some of these in prior episodes, but then they're really this and like that, or and this and that, and they're like that, or if you marry a white person or a black person. And I think for me, those have been unconsciously just in my mind all the time. And I always think about like, oh, if I date this person, oh, but that could happen. But it's like, quite honestly, anything could happen with any person you date or talk to. It's really your ability to discern on who is a good fit or who isn't, whether that be building friendships or building a relationship itself. I will say that I do think it's really brave of you to want to explore your boundaries and to actually submit this to us and express this. I say take things at your own pace for sure. You don't need to rush into anything, as both these ladies has I'd already mentioned. There's a lot of unpacking to do here, and as what Emily had said, there's so many layers, right? Wanting to explore outside of the community, and then on top of that, wanting to build a relationship when you're not really sure how you feel about yourself with those connections. So take it slowly. I'd say allow yourself to feel the feelings that you are getting and really process them as you go. But that's my take on it. I think just go slowly and really understand when you're feeling certain things. Think about like, why do I feel this way?
Yeah, and I think that leads into a bigger conversation. Like we had talked about this previously about just in general, the feedback of people dating outside of any of their culture, right? Whether you're Hmong or not. My cousin's married to a Lao woman, right? And for, when he was younger, that was so like out of this world. Like you're dating someone who's not Hmong. And then, we've had a couple of cousins who like married a white guy, like completely out of their race. And then my sister's married, two black guys. And it's like, I think interracial dating is just going to continue to grow and be a part of the Hmong community. And the conversations happening about that are really interesting. I think you brought it up last time. I don't follow them, but you do. Is that one Hmong creator who said, like, here's why I'm not going to be dating, like, Hmong guys moving forward. And, like, she apparently got, like, a lot of negative backlash about that. But I think, just like we were saying to the submitter, it's based on your experience, right? So this person is saying, I don't know if I want to date outside of my race because my experience with people outside of my race or ethnicity. And this girl is saying, I'm not going to date Hmong people anymore because of my experience with Hmong people. Like, you guys are just trash, which is a nice way to say it.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, regardless of who you end up with, people are going to have an issue with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone has different lived experiences, right? So I can only talk for mine, and I understand there's a lot of nuance in these sort of situations. But, like, for me, I've never been one to judge how you look. Like, I think love is just love. You just come packaged in different ways, right? Whether you're Asian, white, black, Hispanic, whatever it is. But I think for me, what's been really important is that I've really leaned into my interests and I try not to judge myself for it, And I'm someone who pretty much has dated all kinds of races. I've dated all other races, but I've actually never dated a Hmong person. And it's not because I have hatred towards them and I'm a Hmong hater, but I think it's just more that, like, no one really fits the bill and no one really fits expectations. And, like, I think that's okay, But personally speaking, I think, like, my family has never been really open to the idea of me dating outside our race. And that's just certain individuals in my family who are very against it. But, like, that also doesn't stop me because I recognize and I realize that, like, it's my life anyway. So I'll do what I want. And at the end of the day, I realized this over the past couple of years that, like, Hmong people can be very selfish. And I say that because the people who are against me dating interracially and other races, they take it as like a very, like, we want to be able to talk to them, right? We want them to be able to understand us. We want them to agree to the dowry, and it's always about someone else's or the other party's benefit. So, I mean, I know that a lot of other interracial couples share that sort of struggle and concern with me, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, I do receive a lot of pressure from our family community to like keep it in the culture. And I'm gonna keep it real, but like they disguise it as like wanting the best for you, but at the end of the day, like it's a hassle for them. And I think that's something that we as a community need to internally look at. And yeah, cultural preservation and the ideology around that is very real and it's still rampant. And I think sometimes we do need to look inward to understand like why, if you are against it, like why do you not want someone to date outside of your religion or culture or race? And then really address like why you're rejecting other people for it. Because most of the time, like, I know it's not me. And I think that's the thing that people forget about. So
Yeah, I think you brought a really good point earlier of I've actually, okay, let's start with I'm the opposite of these two. I'm like a great old Hmong lover because I've never dated outside of the race. And that was something that I considered before the current relationship I'm in, which is also Hmong too. So I don't know what it's like outside of that. But I think it's interesting to say, our elders in the community want us to stay within the race for our safety, right? So that we could better communicate and all these things.
Yeah.
But in the community, I think it's funny because even though I'm dating or with another Hmong person, there's really no telling if you can even communicate with that person who grew up with the same background as you did, with the same cultural identities and traditions. And so I think that's bogus from the elders and from the community to say like stay within the Hmong community because it'll keep you safe. You'll have help when you need it. And I can firsthand say that that's not true. It's not gonna make things better. It's not gonna allow for the community to help you more because it did it in my case. And so I'm not saying it is for everyone's, but for sure I've seen over and over it doesn't support women at all. So date whoever you think is best fitting to you. And I think that starts with understanding who you are, what you like, what your interests are. And that actually brings me to the point of, since approaching others who are different from you or who you feel are different from you is maybe something that you're scared of, maybe try it with a less direct approach. And by that, I mean by consider taking groups or classes based on your interests, really diving into what you like, hiking, book clubs, volunteering, whatnot, and just meeting people organically through a shared context without really focusing on trying to dive into it, dating someone right off the bat. Get to know others first and break down those barriers and those walls of feeling scared of those groups first. I think that takes off the pressure once you do decide to take a romantic direction with someone.
yeah, and I think the other thing that I want to bring up too is that like I do think from my personal experience that it would be easier to date a Hmong person. And I know that is a valid reason for a lot of the reasons why people date within the race is because it is a lot, honestly, of emotional labor of having to explain your identity, having to explain, the pains of the culture, having to explain like everything about it to someone who doesn't know a thing about it. But I mean, there are other valid concerns where, your partner outside your culture just won't get it, right? Like they won't get your lived experiences. And so like what I tell folks on when they're interested in dating interracially is like there is going to be a bridge between you and your partner, but the empathy, the communication and effort really needs to be put in order to make it work. So just putting that out there, but just a couple of tips that I would give too is that similar to what Dochi said is like asking your friends if they have any other friends like outside of your culture, right? So really putting yourself out there and just getting maybe just like a small idea of if you're even interested in those kinds of people, because like when you seriously date someone, you also want to make sure they're friends. So why would you just want to jump into romantically? And then the other thing I wanted to mention too is that you should go to more social events and like connect with people, because I think it was in this one where she said she was a little shy, but you got to put yourself out there in order to meet other people and to really try to make an effort. So that's my spiel.
I think you need to explore yourself a little bit more. And when I say explore yourself, I mean your reasonings for why. Like, why do you want to make more friends? Why do you want to explore this? Why do you, I think that you should do that for any aspect. But I think especially for this, you should explore the why before you make the next best step.
All right, well, that concludes this Dear Hmong Woman submission. Thank you again so much for sending this in to us. I hope that helps you in your situation and navigating through outside of the Hmong community. And if any of our viewers have any tips, if you've been through this before, can empathize, go ahead and share that in the comments and let us know what your thoughts are. Thank you again so much for tuning in with us. This is the Hmong Woman Podcast. Please go ahead and like, again, comment, and subscribe for more.